Amen. Man, I'm really excited to speak. I do love this church. The little bit that I've gotten to know Pastor Josh, over the last little over a year has been wonderful. And every time I'm in the building, I just get a sense of family, and I get a sense of the Spirit of God being present here. And so I just want to just love that there's an open door for me to get to speak tonight, but also just to be with you. I hope that when we get done, Paul, remind me exactly that the name of the chapter that you guys have is the church is the nation of God. Is that the exact right time? The new nation. Okay. Um, I so this is a thing that's been in me for a very long time, over 8 years now. We're going to walk from Genesis to Revelation. We'll spend the first half in the Old Testament. We'll spend the second half in the New Testament. I do hope that what you gather from tonight is, um, I want you to be able to drop into any book in the Bible in the future and get to see how that book is playing with the other books around it and with the entire narrative itself. And interestingly enough, I think this is missed a lot. The story of the scripture itself is this story of the church being the new nation. And so I kind of want you to see that. It's not the way that we tend to think about the story of God or the overarching narrative, but it absolutely is. And so kind of want to go there because it's really beautiful. If I get to any place tonight where you feel like I'm saying something that doesn't fit into your framework, or it's like, whoa, slow down, or hey, we need to chat about that, just stop me. That you can raise your hand, you can yell at me, you can, I mean, anything. So just like we can go about this together. You know what I mean? So don't hesitate to interrupt me, and you know, throw my ideas on the floor and say, prove it. You know what I mean? Like, that's perfectly okay. Um, so let's jump in. Maybe the best way to do this when we're talking about the Old Testament is to get a category in our mind. We'll spend a little bit of time in Genesis, and then we're going to like fly fast through the Old Testament. We won't hit every book, obviously, but I want you to see the way that all those books flow together. Um, Genesis 1 to Genesis 11. Will you guys give me any stories that come to mind that you can remember from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11? All right, perfect. Okay. Creation. All right, we're going to skip a couple and we're going to go to Noah. Right up there, we'll put A&E in creation narrative. That's Adam and Eve. What else is in there? Cain and Abel. Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to give them their own section. Okay. Anything else in there? All the way down to 11. Babel. Perfect. Okay, so that would be 11, right? Noah kind of runs. So Abraham is 12, and I'm glad you brought it up because the point that I want to show here as we kick off is that the entire Bible jumps out of Genesis 12, not Genesis 1. Genesis 12 is probably the keystone text from which everything flows out of. David, Moses, Jesus, even the way that Galatians is going to talk about Jesus is that in Jesus you are a recipient of the blessing of Abraham and you would receive the promised Holy Spirit. So even the way that Paul is going to understand Jesus, Jesus is fulfilling a promise that God made to Abraham. And the promise that he made to Abraham is incredibly strategic in understanding how everything else unfolds. And so we can't go there yet. All right. But I am going to put that right here because it's key. Okay. All right. What else is in here? I have the fall. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. We're going to do that one right there. So, and I don't write neatly. I write just to write. So if you can't read it, it's like I'm hoping you remember what I wrote when I said it, but it's not there so that you could read it later. Um, is that right? Okay. See, walking in the footsteps of giants here. Um, keep in mind, Noah goes from about 6 to 9, right? So that's chapter 6 all the way to chapter 9. It's a big chunk there. Jacob is he's a little after Abraham. That's right. Okay, all right. I'm going to put a little dot on the page because it's really important. We're going to glance off of it later. And we're going to glance off of it later, but I need you to see it as a key part of this story. And this is not something that most people see as a key part of the story. They see it as a weird statement that should be ignored. The Genesis 6 narrative, the Noah narrative, opens with a very weird statement. Is anybody familiar with what that really weird statement is at the beginning of Genesis 6 that kind of leads you into the story of the flood? It's a very weird statement. That is in there, but that's just normal. That's all over the Bible. There's something weird. Uh-huh. Super weird. There we go. Yeah, so we're going to go here for just a second. We're going to glance on it. If we need to go deeper into this later, that would give me great joy. But if we don't have time for it, that's also fine. But it is an enormous part of the story. The way that it says in the Bible is that that God looks at the wickedness that's on the earth. And then he just makes this quick aside. And he says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful. And they took whoever they chose as their wives, and they had children with them. And then it says, these are the Nephilim, the mighty men of old. And then it just, whoop, and it doesn't explain anything, and then it goes, all right, let me tell you about how God flooded the earth. But I'm just going to put here sons of God. And the point that I'm making there is this is the introduction of a character, a set of characters into the story. And it's an incredibly important introduction of those characters because ancient readers would have known exactly what was being said there. We all are modern, scientific people. So angels having babies with men is weird. But for ancient people, that is not weird. That is absolutely normal. For the Greeks, for the Romans, for every ancient Near Eastern culture, the Sumerians, all of them, that's very normal. That is how nations got established in their mind. That a being, a warrior king, Gilgamesh is a great example. Epic of Gilgamesh is a warrior king who establishes a nation, and he is the product of an angelic being, a god, and a human. Hercules, same thing. Like you could just go back in history, and this is just part of history. And it's part of nearly every culture's understanding is that that's how their nation came to be. Their nation was founded by a warrior king who was half and half, right? And this is the infatuation with the Percy Jackson series that's going on right now. Just grabbing onto that same narrative, right? So just keep in mind, this is not crazy to original authors. It's just crazy to us. Okay, so keep going here. Noah 6. We're missing one thing. What's that? I've got 10. What's 10? Perfect. Okay, so it's important that you notice that, right? I'm glad you caught that. Okay. The way that you should understand Genesis 1 to 11, when I say this word, don't hear me say that it's not historical. That's not what I mean. The way that it's written is it's written as prehistory, not as history. Whereas Genesis 12 is written as history. And so what I mean by that is this. The language, the Hebrew, the way that it's structured, everything about Genesis 1 to 11 is distinct in that it's shrouded in a degree of mystery. It's intentionally obtuse When I say obtuse, it's intentionally hard to grapple with. Like even when you're in the creation story, right? Light is made, but the sun isn't made until the third day. So there's little things in there that are making you like what that it's causing you to question, and it's intentionally the way that it's either the Proverbs or the Psalmist would put it, that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of kings to search it out. That's exactly what's going on in Genesis 1 to 11. It's intentionally shrouded in mystery because it's talking about a period of time that was different from our time. People lived to be thousands of years old or hundreds of years old, almost 1,000 years old. Like so. If you remember that in here, we didn't really get into it, but what follows in here is you get the lineage of Cain and you get the lineage of Seth. So Cain kills Abel, and then you read the lineage of Cain, and this guy fathers this guy, and this guy fathers this guy, and this guy fathers this guy. And at the end of the lineage of Cain is a guy named Lamech, and he says, like, I've killed today. He goes to his wife. Today, a young man wounded me, and I killed him. And he called his two wives together to boast about his vengeance. And he said, if Cain's vengeance was sevenfold, mine was 77-fold. So you're seeing in the lineage that that Cain was just the beginning of the sort of evil that would unfold in his lineage, right? And that guy's name was Lamech. And he says this, my vengeance is 77-fold. Well, then the story jumps, and Adam and Eve have Seth. And Seth has children, and this person had this person, and this person lived 700 years, and this person lived 900 years. So it doesn't say that about the lineage of Cain, but it says it about the lineage of Seth. So what the author is trying to show you is that this sort of wickedness leads to death, because that was the promise in Genesis 1 to 3. You eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's not that you go to hell, it's that you die. So death is the problem that's locked up in there. It's death itself. And so it doesn't mean that hell doesn't exist, not at all, but Genesis is driving something. And then what he's also saying is if you walk with God, there's life. So that's why the lineage of Seth has got these people living for a really long time. And then you get to the end of the line of Seth. And interestingly enough, it's a guy named Lamech again. And you know how long Lamech lives for? 777 years. So in Hebraic numerology, it's showing you there is vengeance and endless death in this one line. And then this other line, there is life. And there is life without end to the full. So you're even seeing locked up in the story, this thing that Genesis 1 to 11 does, is it uses lineages and then narratives. By narratives, I just mean story. It uses this person had this person, and this person had this person, and this person had this person, and then it'll tell you a story about it. That's exactly what's going on in here. All of this is driving to try to get you, the reader, to try to understand why are things the way that they are now. And so even think about this. What is the thing that's on the news all the time right now? War. Exactly right. If you read Genesis 6, it's violence of men that's on violence of men, right? Nation rising up against nation. When the Bible talks about the end times, that's what it's going to talk about. Nation rising up against nation, warfare. So the author is trying to use Genesis 1 to 11 to weave into your prehistory that in this shrouded past that is not fully been revealed to us, it's got mystery all around it, and it's so wild. Things happened there that have created the status quo of history now. And one of the things that is a part of the life of human beings in all of history is that nation goes to war against nation. And so the national struggles that are going on are just a part of our life. So I'm a history major, and when I studied history at SFA, history is essentially just the study of wars. For the most part, it's the study of rulers, it's the study of wars. That's how we understand history, how nation interacts with nation. So it's interesting that by the time this is all driving, up here you're getting this mysterious explanation of why humans are the way that they are. Why are husbands and wives insecure around each other? Why do brothers have rivalry? Why is there rivalry between them? So there's all of this, like, what's wrong with the human being themselves? And then what's wrong with people themselves, right? That's what it's driving towards. So once you get done with Genesis 10, you get the lineage. So if you remember, Genesis 2 opens up. This is the genealogy of heaven and earth. Then you get the genealogy of Cain. You get the genealogy of Seth. And then here you get the genealogy of nations. You get how the nations came to be. Now, the reason I interjected this in here is because we're going to drive somewhere with that. In the ancient world, the authors of the New Testament, authors of the Old Testament, and in most non-Western nations, they don't just view nations as independent pieces of land with structures of government. They view themselves as pieces of land with particular gods over them. Does that make sense? All right, so welcome me here. There were no Indians 700 years ago who are roaming around thinking, would I prefer Buddhism, or would I prefer Taoism, or would I prefer Islam? That nation, the Cherokee Nation, worships the gods of their nation. Gods and nations are intrinsically connected. Intrinsically connected. It's only in the modern Western world that we think differently, that we tend to view religion as more like a philosophy, a set of ideas that you can prescribe to. The ancient world and the Eastern world does not view it that way. They view nations as having gods over them. And so this is why you'll see throughout the entirety of the Old Testament, you worship the gods of the nations. So Israel, and this is why the God we worship refers to himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the God of Israel. That Yahweh is who we worship. He is the God of a nation, a particular nation. And he has opened the door up to people from other nations to worship him. He very, very seldom, he does occasionally, but very seldom does he refer to himself as the God of creation or the God of the world. Now, he doesn't pull back from saying he has power over those things, but he is in a relationship and a covenant relationship to a nation. And that starts right here. All of the Old Testament is narratives, stories, and writings from that nation's relationship to their God and that nation's propensity to go and worship gods from other nations until God tells them, you can't do that anymore in my house. You can go worship them in Assyria or Babylon or Egypt. You follow me there? So the reason I bring this up here is because these two are connected, and it's connected to Babel. Does anybody know who founded Babel there in Genesis 10? It was Nimrod. Yeah. And if you read the story of Nimrod, it says something 3 times, that Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And then it said of Nimrod that he was the first of the mighty hunters before the Lord, and he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And it's like, okay, we got it. Like, what's the repetition about? And it says right after that he began to be, and in the Hebrew text it says he began to be a Gibberim. And it's connecting this guy that founds Babel to this rebellion up here. And this rebellion up here is linked to all of the nations that flow out of here. And I'll show you this a little more in a minute, but just kind of giving you a little precursor to it. So Genesis 10 establishes this really sad reality that humans were invited to be in a relationship with the Creator, and they didn't want it. So they walk away. And what happens after that is this. It gets so bad on the earth because no humans are in covenant relationship with God that God looks at the earth. He's grieved in his heart. He's grieved, and he floods it. But he saves just one guy, Noah. So you need to understand that in this narrative, the story of Noah is almost like a reset button. Words are repeated over and over again after Noah walks off the ark. The exact same thing that was said over Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue, is said exactly over Noah as the the rainbow is in the sky, same thing is said, be fruitful, multiply. There's a reset button. And so the reader of the beginning of Genesis should be asking, are Noah and his family going to do anything different than Adam and Eve and their family? Will they stay in covenant with Yahweh or will they not? Right? And that's the question being asked as soon as they step off the boat. Is it going to go the same way that it went before? And then what you read is Noah's an awesome guy, right? Until he gets off the boat. And what does he do when he gets off the boat? He plants a vineyard and gets hammered. Yeah, hammered drunk. And then it gets real weird. Again, between something goes on with his 3 sons, and we don't know what that really is about, and they uncover the nakedness of their father, and Canaan's cursed, and you're like, where did this go? The author is answering the question for you. Noah and his family are human beings, just like Adam and Eve were human beings. And in this state, there is going to be a slow unwinding. And then I want you to see what happens in Noah. As soon as he comes off the boat, you get an aside out of the Noah story to another lineage, which is the Table of Nations. So it's establishing for you the nations were created. Prior to this, you don't really have nations in any sort of sense. But here, you get the creation of nations. So essentially, the world is now, there's a game board set. And the game board is all the humans that were invited into relationship with Yahweh have rejected that relationship with Yahweh. And there's this sort of sense of like hopelessness. And that is what the story of the Tower of Babel is about. It's jumping out of the genealogy of nations and it's giving you a narrative. This may feel really weird. Like what's up with this? Like in all of history, what's the story about a tower and people being united and God being mad at their unity and then confusing their language? Like God doesn't like skyscrapers? Do you know what I mean? Like there's something, like again, all of these stories have this sort of like, it's shrouded in mystery because it's prehistory, right? Babel is establishing in you a sense of hopelessness. And so you need to imagine Genesis 1 to 12 as sort of like a movie, but the movie begins on Genesis 12. And then as you watch that movie, you get these quick snapshots back to the past that give you like, oh, so that's why that character's like that. Oh, that's why that character's like that. That's what's going on in 1 to 11. It's the background to the actual story beginning in Genesis 12. And so the ending of that backstory and the laying down of the foundation, Genesis 11 is incredibly important in that because this is the way it unfolds. Everybody is yearning again. Human beings are yearning again for what they had lost in Eden, which was access to the presence of God. So what do they decide to do? We want access to the presence of God. So they try to build a tower and get back to heaven on their own terms. And then it says, and they're united and they can do whatever they put their hearts to. It's such weird language because it's like anything they decide to do, they can do. And God does not like that. The reality is what you're seeing is that humans unified in opposition to God's will is a dangerous thing that leads to this. So how does God slow down and not have to throw fire on the earth or throw water on the earth again or whatever he's going to do? He makes nations war against each other because humanity divided and at war against each other is better than humanity united at war against him. And so the nations are established, and that's what Babel's about. They want the presence of God back. They're unified in attempting to try to get there. There's some other stuff that we could go into that we're not going to go into about what exactly are they doing in that tower. And I would argue they're doing a bunch of this weird stuff again, and they're trying to invite this down again. We can go there. That's in other texts that were written alongside the Bible, not in the biblical text, but other texts that are written in the ancient Near East. They're going into all that stuff. It's fun and interesting, but not helpful for tonight. They're doing more than just building a tower there. They're trying to access things that they don't need to be accessing. You can go into witchcraft and that sort of stuff, but they're trying to access spiritual things. And so they have this unity. And so God looks down and he divides them and he gives them different tongues, different languages. And then they spread out over the face of the earth. And it's sort of like the snapshot at the beginning of the story ends. Nobody knows God. Everyone's divided. They've walked away from this building project that was supposed to take them from heaven to heaven. God doesn't want to be involved with that. That's wrong. And there is no one in relationship to Yahweh. So it's like the nations have been dispersed. They've been created and dispersed. And there's no one that walks with God. And it's like the scene ends. And you're like, what the heck? What's he going to do? Like, what a hopeless place we've gone. From creation, beautiful, give it to human beings, gives it to human beings. They listen to a talking snake who is also Satan. Brother kills brother. His lineage is just terrible. Ends with a guy that kills kids and brags to his 2 wives about it. And then these other people that look like they crop up in the line of Seth, and these people walk with God. There's something in there, like Enoch doesn't even die. You know what I mean? So you're like, oh my gosh, who are these people? And then that leads to Noah, and you're like, oh man, okay, these are the people that are going to fix things and set it right and be in relationship with God and make the earth what it's supposed to be again. Noah is the Ish of Genesis 3, that there will be a man who comes and the seed of woman will crush the head of serpent. It's in Hebrew, it's this word Ish. It's the one who will crush the head of the serpent. So even from Genesis 4, they're looking for the Ish, the man who will crush the head of serpent. They don't know that guy's not going to come for a really long time. Right, so they're looking for him. So when you're reading the story, you're like, maybe Noah's the Ish, and then he gets off the boat and he gets hammered, and then he does weird stuff, and you're like, maybe he's not the Ish, maybe he's not the man who will crush the head of serpent. Who will crush the head of serpent? You know, it's like the question being raised. And then the Tower of Babel happens, and it's like, well, maybe nobody will. Nations have been created. None of them have God as their God. And they're scattered over the face of the earth. Whew. Terrible story. And we're only 11 chapters in. Right? And then you need to imagine that then the scene opens again. And God has his eye on this guy, Abram. And Abram means in Hebrew, exalted father. And he can't have kids. But what was the curse over man and woman? You're going to work the ground and you're going to have pain and childbearing. So he goes to the man who's a symbol of the curse. He goes to the man who's a symbol of the curse. Cannot have kids. Wife is barren. His name means exalted father, and he can't have. Like, what a bummer of a name, right? It'd be like my parents naming me like extremely wealthy person, you know? And then I'm just in poverty my whole life. You know what I mean? And it's like, come on. Can't have kids. And he makes a promise to him. Not only are you going to have kids, but let's actually read the text. Let's read the text. So Genesis 12. Would somebody read Genesis 12? And maybe we do 1, 2, and 3. And read it slowly and with.
Call of Abram.
Yeah.
Chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, your father's household, to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you.
Okay.
Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran.
Yeah. So keep in mind, this is a story about a man whom God is going to turn into a nation and then make a covenant with him. So he scatters the nations, and they don't have, let me put it this way, they do have gods, but those gods are not good, they are not loving, they are not kind. So you need to understand that from an ancient Near Eastern perspective, the nations, there are other gods that exist. Those gods are spiritual beings created by Yahweh disloyal to Yahweh and using their position over nations to deceive, to destroy, to usurp, and to push human beings down, right? This is more than just unclean spirits trying to make you anxious so that you'll be a jerk to your boss and get fired. Do you know what I mean? Like that. This is different than that. This is when Ephesians is talking about the rulers and authorities, right? These are rulers and authorities. So spiritual beings. And so this is why Paul will even say, you're sacrificing to demons when you sacrifice meat to idols and then you eat it. Because in their mind, they do worship. Like there are gods of Canaan. There are the gods of the Amorites. There are the gods of, and all these nations do have actual gods. Now they're little g gods, but they are in fact spiritual beings, and those spiritual beings do want worship, and they also don't want worship. They want human blood. That's why they're always driving their participants towards animal sacrifice, human sacrifice. They're driving them towards sexual deviance and like this like weird cult sex prostitution stuff that goes on in the ancient world. But it's because there are spiritual beings that hate humans, hate the image of God in humans, and they're trying to push the image of God in humans down and make the image of God subservient to them, right? And so you got to keep in mind that that those nations have gods, right? So when we think missions, you have to think in that way. You can't go to other nations, especially non-Western nations, and tell them their gods don't exist, because their gods do exist. And they've seen their gods do things in power. And they've seen powerful things happen that are spiritual things. So when we say that they don't exist, we turn something that's actually true about that nation on its head because we act like there's only one God. And that's not entirely accurate. There is only one creator of all things, the God of Israel. There are a lot of other spiritual beings functioning as gods of the nations, and the story of the scriptures is that God is opening the door in Jesus to invite people out of that nation that has gods that don't love them and hate them into the covenant promises of Israel. So, but what you'll see when we get into it is that invitation has been made without you having to become an Israelite, without you having to become submissive to Mosaic law. And that's why it's not just an old nation; it's a new nation you've been invited into. But it's founded on the covenant promises of this nation, right? Okay, so
Okay, I have a question on
yes,
that. You said that God, Yahweh, created the other gods for each of those. Is there somewhere in the Bible where it says that He created those other gods?
yeah. So probably the best way to go there. Let's go to, if you want to go here for a second, Deuteronomy 32 is going to be and do okay. We got to do this the right way though. Does anybody have ESV? If you go in NIV, if you go in NIV, you're taking a translation that travels through Greek into Latin, and then it travels into English. You need a translation that is based on Dead Sea Scrolls and our discovery of the original, or at least the older Aramaic Hebrew texts. So ESV is that translation. There's a few others, so the translations that have come about like within the 1980s, 90s. They were English Standard Version, right? Deuteronomy 32, I believe, is right. He's going to be around verse 11. No, it's not 11. Hold on. Let me give you the right place. Well, let me give you the right place. Uh-oh. Yeah, sorry, Deuteronomy 32, 8. Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody use the English Standard Version? You've got it pulled up on your phone. Okay, because this is one of those places where you have a little number next to it, and it'll kind of give you the sort of the linguistic heritage that it flows through. No, in some cases, it will be when you're referencing discrepancies in Hebrew specifically. But no, there is no one that I would call most accurate. It depends on what you're trying to get out of the text. It's the difficult thing, right? Because, just to make a quick aside, it's impossible to go word for word from Hebrew into English. And it's impossible to go word for word from Greek, if you're talking about the New Testament, from Greek into English. So you have to do this dance between sometimes word for word works, and then sometimes you get to some words like, here's a good example. When the Hebrew text says God's anger burned hot, um, it actually says in Hebrew, nose hot is all it says in Hebrew. And if somebody in Hebrew is patient, instead of saying that person is patient, in Hebrew it will say, this person is long of nose, is what the Hebrew text says. They're long of nose. So that's what I mean by if you read ancient literature word for word, and we actually just translated word for word, we would read that and be like, what does this have to do with him being a long nose? And it's because every language uses what we call idioms, you know? It's just the way the language will take words. And you know what I mean when I say what's up. You know that I mean what's been going on today, right? But if we were to write that and then 2,000 years later somebody is translating English. Wait, is that the Bible Project? Yeah, so if you are into Bible Project, they have a series called the Spiritual Being series. It's 7 videos, and Tim Mackey does a fantastic job of little video, like very short clips on some of what I'm talking about right now. So if we get out of this and you're like, BibleProject.org, Spiritual Being series, and there's 7 videos, really great stuff. He really did a good job of making it accessible.
Is this the verse that you're looking for?
32:8. Yeah, you're trying to keep me on track. That's good, Pastor Dan. Thank you.
32:8.
32:8. Will you read that out loud for me?
Yeah, it says that God Most High gave land to every nation. He assigned a guardian angel to each of them. He assigned them the Dead Sea Scrolls and the ancient translation, the standard Hebrew text. So there were as many nations as Israel, that is Jacob, had children.
So I'm gonna read from the ESV, which is gonna kind of, so that's very interpretive. In Hebrew, this is what it says: when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when He divided mankind, He fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. So the translators of the Bible have a very, I keep hitting the microphone, have a very weird relationship to this Hebrew phrase, B'nai Elohim, which just means sons of God. And they will all over the place translate it out because it's introduced here as a set of spiritual beings, a classification of beings who seem to be disloyal to Yahweh, but were also created by Yahweh. Does that bother anybody? So when the New Testament's going to refer to this category of being, they will use that language, principality, or in Greek, archaikon exousias, archaikai exousias, which means ruler and authority. That's how Paul will refer to that in the New Testament. Exactly right. We tend to go the route of, oh, that's a demon that Satan gave a higher rank to, and that's not accurate. It's a classification of being whom. So if you're familiar with the book of Job, you know, at the end of Job, and Job has been kind of going on for 37 chapters, and God finally comes to Job and he answers him in the whirlwind, and he starts asking these questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Remember what he says. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Right? So Job 38 is talking about that category of being, a category of being that's present at creation. Right? You're also seeing, by the time you get to Genesis 6, this category of being is also doing something weird and breaking rules that they shouldn't be breaking. When you get to 1 Peter, you see that category of being is what, when Peter says, there were angels who broke boundaries that they shouldn't have broken, and now they are in chains of gloomy darkness, waiting for the day of their judgment. So the thing is the Old Testament has like a zoo of spiritual creatures, and we don't. We have angels are spiritual being good guys, demons are spiritual being bad guys. And the Old Testament doesn't function that way, but because that's our conception, and that's been our conception since the medieval period in about 1100s, whenever we do go to translate, this is the problem with translation, you do have to be interpretive. The translators, when they get to those places, they want us, the readers, to understand it, so they have to translate a little bit. And some will translate this way, and some will translate this way. And sometimes the NIV got it more right than the ESV, but then there'll be places over here where the ESV got it wrong and the NIV got it right, and there'll be places where the KJV did a better job. So that's why I say there's not one, and there's even places where the Passion is doing a better job than all of them, because they're actually letting you feel what the poetry meant when you read the Psalms, as opposed to like this. Well, some of the translations make the Psalms just so boring, and it's like, this is beautiful poetry, right? So, but in this case, in Deuteronomy 32:8, right? So that it says to compare the Dead Sea Scrolls to the Septuagint to the Masoretic text, like that category of translations. What they're seeing is across three different veins of ancient documents. That's the consistent they're seeing. If they go back to the Latin translation that came through the Catholic Church, there were some things that were translated out. And so NIV had that because NIV is just a little bit older. But there's places where NIV is great. So don't hear me say that NIV is bad at all. It's just that it can get you off in some of these. So the thing that, yes, sir.
So God didn't assign these little g's to these nations. They just picked which little g they wanted to follow.
I think he assigned them, and they had a function. And their function was to steward the nation. And they didn't steward the nation. So I'll read that to you real quick. Psalm 82 goes here. So Psalm 82, I'll just read it real quick so you can follow me here for a minute. And again, I'm gonna give what it's actually saying, because like I said, there is places where even in the ESV they still get weird about it. There'll be places where in the Hebrew it says sons of God, and they'll translate it away and they'll say the mighty ones. And you're like, what? Why'd you do that? And it's because we get weird about this. This is just something we get weird about. So Psalm 82, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Okay, interesting. Small g God, right? And then God speaks in the psalm, and he says this: how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? So you have God talking to other spiritual beings and saying, why are you acting this way? Right? And so keep in mind, when the ancient Hebrews use the words judge, you need to carry what it does in the book of Judges. This is more of a rulership function, not necessarily a judge with a robe and a gavel, right? Why do you judge unjustly? It's like, this is, in Greek, it'd be krinomai. It's, why do you weigh and measure wrongly? Why do you split things apart improperly? How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? And he's saying spiritual beings shouldn't be doing that. you should be a spiritual being like he is. And when it says, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the rights of the afflicted and the destitute. If you read the Psalms and the Proverbs and you read the prophets, that's what you're going to see. God talks about his character. Like, I am a father to the fatherless. I'm an upholder to the widow. He talks about the way that he is as a God, but he's doing that in distinction to the gods of the nations who are not that way, right? They aren't that way. He's not just saying this is like how I am. He's saying I am in distinction to these other beings. Um, Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. He's talking about humans. They walk about in darkness, and all the foundations of the earth are shaken. So humans walk about in darkness, and it makes the foundations of the earth shake because humans are the ones who are supposed to be ruling in authority over the earth. They were given the earth in Genesis 1. And when humans don't do what they ought to do, the earth trembles, Romans 8. The earth is groaning, waiting for the sons of God to be revealed, right? So, like, the earth groans underneath the poor rulership of humanity over it. And humans have given their rulership away to these other spiritual beings. That's what Genesis 3 is telling you. A disloyal spiritual being came, a disloyal spiritual being came and told humans what to do that was in distinction to the Creator God. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And it's been happening ever since. So they have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. And then he says again, I said you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any ruler. And then there's this cry from the psalmist, arise, O God, and judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations. Do you see the language in there? He's saying these nations have other gods, but all of the Hebrew texts are saying there's coming a day where God takes the nations back. This is the whole purpose of Jesus, right? This is why in those prophecies about Jesus in Isaiah, that he's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron and the government will be upon his shoulders, right? All of the songs around Jesus at Christmas time, for whatever reason, we only sing these at Christmas time, but they are the ones that talk about Jesus being king of all the earth. And he is the one who's going to come and he's going to take all these people back from all these nations. And it's not because they don't have gods. It's because they do have gods and those gods are wicked. And then, once we get in, gosh, what time? We're jumping in the New Testament. What time am I supposed to give a break? We got 10 minutes to a break. Okay. I don't want to give away the New Testament part of this. I'm jumping in too much. Because it starts to answer questions, right? About, Paul says weird stuff. Don't you know you'll judge angels one day? Can't you figure out this problem between you? Why are you taking each other to court? And it's because the understanding is those gods of the nations, Jesus is going to take you from the nations, bring you into the covenant promises of his nation. And then, like Romans says, that you and your heel will be what tramples Satan. Not just Jesus's. You'll crush the head of the serpent under your feet. Don't you know that's what it says in the last chapter of Romans 14, 15, I forget. And so that's the story being told, that God wants to make those other gods, he wants to make them embarrassed. He wants to not just dismantle them, but he wants to humiliate them. They have ruled over the nations. He's saying you're going to die like any ruler. You're going to die like a man, right? So you got to see that this here would have made so much sense to an ancient reader, and then the story just unfolds that way. So, Deuteronomy was written by Moses. This is the very end of Deuteronomy. It's the very end of Torah, and Moses is giving the last kind of final words to the nation of Israel. And that's what he says there in Deuteronomy 32:8, that there was the day, and we didn't quite finish it. There's the beautiful part that follows it. Deuteronomy 32:8, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. And then it says this in verse 9, but the Lord's portion, and then let's translate it the right way, but Yahweh's portion is his people. Jacob, which is, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's name is changed into Israel after he wrestles with God. But Israel is his allotted heritage. that Yahweh has a nation, and that nation is stemming from a promise made here, where the exalted father who could have no kids does have a kid. And he's the son of promise, Isaac. And then Isaac has Jacob, and then Jacob has 12. And then those 12 grow into this nation in Egypt. And then Moses goes in and extracts that nation now out of a slavery, but also out of the gods of Egypt. So if you understand sort of ancient history and you understand all the gods of Egypt, then you begin to see that when Moses goes in and plague after plague happens, it's not just bad things. It is a cry to the Egyptian people that your gods are not actually gods. All of those are a statement to the gods of Egypt. He is disarming and dismantling the gods of Egypt, right? And the final one that he does is Pharaoh himself, because Pharaoh is viewed as a god. And so he comes to Pharaoh and he says, your son, the next god of Egypt, is killed, right? Like all of that is we use the word polemic, but that's not good enough. It's like shots fired at the most powerful nation in the world at that time to the gods of that nation, that these are my people. You can't do anything to them. You're magicians. They have some power, but they're legit weak compared to Yahweh and him and what he can do. And he extracts his nation. And on the way out, they're giving them gold and silver, right? Like get out of here.
That's how their magicians were able to turn their staffs into serpents.
Yeah, because there's real spiritual power there. It's perverted spiritual power, but it's real spiritual power. So I mean, the reason that witchcraft is so bad, witchcraft. I mean, there's witches in Nacogdoches. You know what I mean? Like we got people doing weird stuff in the cemeteries and all that, but they're playing around with something real and dark. It's not that they're doing meaningless stuff. They're trying to get in the back door of spirituality, right? The only real open door to spirituality is Holy Spirit and life with Him, right? And I think you guys know the church has tried to cut out spirituality in general. There are so many veins of the church that they don't like spirituality at all. So it's like no witchcraft, no Holy Spirit either. You know what I mean? And it's like, no. We need good spirituality because the world is distorted by bad forms of spirituality, right? And young people now, they long for that, right? They long for true, meaningful, real spirituality because they're seeing the darkness of it. 5 minutes. Okay. All right, so, okay, are you feeling me here? That by Genesis 12, that's the story. I'm going to take you, a man who loves me. That's this beautiful relational thing. I'm going to take you, I'm going to make a nation from you, and I'm going to bring you into covenant with me. I'm going to bless you. And anybody that curses you, I'm going to curse. I'm going to love you like a firstborn son, right? If you read the prophets, that's the way he talks about Israel. My firstborn son, you're my wife. Like, I'm going to love you. I'm going to clothe you. I'm going to bless you. The idea there is he's creating, right? I'm going to draw Israel poorly. He's creating a nation, and Egypt's down here, right? And let's say the rivers are there, and you've got Assyria over here, and you got Babylon over here, and then Persia's over here, and then they won't come into play till later. You got Greece and Italy and the Romans and the Alexander the Great. We're just surrounded by all these nation builders, these powerful nations. Every powerful nation in history came from here. Well, until the United States came along, but surrounded by these nations, right? Godless nations, evil nations, wicked nations. And he's saying, I'm going to make you mine. I'm going to set you in the middle of it, and I'm going to make you sacred space. And what we mean by that is I'm going to cause it to flourish here. I'm going to cause your wine vats to be full. I'm going to cause your grain to abound. I'm going to cause your flocks to abound. And other nations are going to come into here and they're going to say, what the heck is going on here? That was the idea. And that's what's going on in Deuteronomy. Walk in my ways, right? This is Deuteronomy 8. I've laid before you blessings and curses, life and death. So choose life that you and your children may live. And he's like saying to them, like, walk in the ways of Torah, of Moses, like walk in those ways. And if you do, I'll bless you and you'll be protected and there'll never be a conqueror that comes in. I'll guard your borders. And he's saying, I'll make you mine, but you have to stay devoted to me. And right, they don't. He's even saying that in Deuteronomy. He's before it even happens, before they even get to the promised land, he's like, y'all are going to screw it up. It's going to be terrible. You're going to be taken from your nation. It's already in Deuteronomy. But there is sacred space, and then they establish in the middle of it even more sacred space, Jerusalem. And then they establish even in the middle of that even more sacred space, the temple. And then in the middle of that, even the most sacred space, the Holy of Holies, right? And there, God himself is with his people, fulfilling a promise that he made to Moses. When Moses, he said, ask me anything you want. Moses is like, well, I want to see your face, and we're not going anywhere without you. You can give us the nations if you want. You can give us the promised land, but we want to go with you. And that's when he looks at him. He's like, oh, I love you, man. You're awesome. Like, I love you. And he does. He goes with him. And so the tabernacle finally, in David and Solomon. So then at the height, I got 2 minutes, right? 1 minute? Okay. Sort of the height of the story of the Old Testament is this nation's established. It is sacred. And then David is delivering the nation from the hands of all the enemies that Joshua didn't get out, right? And then keep in mind, let's just go here for a second. When the Israelites are on their way in, what is it they're scared of here? Giants, interestingly enough. Giants are what? The offspring of these people. When they finally get back in there 40 years later, there's only 2 guys left from the original who went in with the 12. Who were those? Joshua and Caleb. And what's Caleb all about? What's the last thing said about Caleb? Give me the high country where the giants still live. And he warred until he died, right? Right? So he's making the point, like, the offspring of this rebellion, we are going to drive out, right? And those who walk with God, they are going to drive out of the land the offspring of that rebellion, the second rebellion. The first rebellion was Adam and Eve. The second rebellion was Genesis 6. Okay, 10-minute break, and then we'll get back into this story. Sorry.